This is Lunchtime Agenda.
Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Agenda. I'm Laura Jays, and as we speak this afternoon, some of the most powerful players in the financial world are meeting here in Sydney. The Treasurer, Joe Hockey, is playing host to G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, and he hopes to achieve real progress in some key areas. They are global growth, infrastructure and investment, and to a lesser extent, multinational profit shifting.
There is no single decision maker in this body. You've got the 20 biggest economies in the world sitting around the table. They represent 85% of the world economy, and we've got to get an agreement. So we'll see how that pans out, but it's certainly going to be a busy few days.
More on that with Chris Richardson from Deloitte Access Economics later in the program. But as we know, the government is still grappling with the May budget and will be doing that for a number of months. Now, today, the Treasurer has told Sky News that spending on health, welfare and education is nearing unsustainable levels, and it looks like the government will be targeting Medicare.
We are ringing an early warning bell about the sustainability of these things, about the sustainability of our healthcare system, the sustainability of our welfare system, the sustainability of our education system. If we want to maintain a reasonable quality of life, we need now to have a good and proper and well-informed discussion about whether we can afford what we have, and if we can't, we've got to find ways to make sure that we can have a system that delivers what Australians expect.
We will absolutely keep our commitments. Does that mean that every single bit of existing spending will remain in perpetuity? Of course not, because if we find a more efficient way of spending money, if we find a more effective way of deploying taxpayers' resources to help the Australian community, we'd be crazy not to adopt it.
And this will be a challenge. How does the Abbott government keep all of its election promises and still cut spending in the May budget to sustainable levels? Well, Bill Shorten has accused the government of flying kites to see how the public will react to some of these changes.
People should get the health care they need, not the health care they can afford. We should not go down the American road where your access to the health system depends upon how rich you are. Before the election, Tony Abbott said that he wouldn't touch Medicare, that they wouldn't cut health care.
So, are we headed towards a means-tested Medicare payments to see the doctor, or even a raising of the pension age? Joining me today on the program is Liberal MP Alex Hawke, here with me in Sydney, and Labor MP Graham Perrott in Brisbane. Now, Alex Hawke, first to you. If you do have an income of over $200,000, should you be paying a fee to go and see the doctor?
Yeah, well, Laura, this is what the Health Minister and the government is saying, that the national conversation is needed about this question. We know that healthcare costs have gone up dramatically in the last 10 years. They're going to go up even more over the next 10 years. And people who can afford access to the health system should indeed make a contribution to it. And that makes the whole system more sustainable. And the view, I guess, from government is if we don't start this dialogue now, and if we don't have this conversation now, in future years, the system will become unsustainable and dramatic action will be needed. So far better to do small incremental things up front rather than have to take dramatic change in the future.
You talk about having a dialogue and a conversation, but Joe Hockey's, from his words, it seems like this is an issue that needs to be tackled sooner rather than later. So how long is this conversation going to stretch on for?
Well, that's absolutely right. And we've got the Commission of Audit, of course, which will come back, and healthcare expenditure is in the Commission of Audit. And the crisis, the urgency that's brought this on is, of course, we've been left with a hideous deficit and debt by Labor. And that really has meant that the unsustainability of the welfare, education and health systems for the future is really heightened by the sense that there is no money in government. So we have to start these conversations early. And I'd rather see a small change up front early, like a co-payment, rather than have to do big things down the track. Labor knows these kinds of reforms are necessary. Even Graham Richardson said today, he knew it 20 years ago that there ought to be some sort of co-payment system. So Labor's received this advice in the past, and I know the government is now looking at this because of the heightened crisis with the budget.
Graham Perrott, when we talk about having the Medicare means tested and also a $6 fee for all GP visits, it's little more than the cost of a cup of coffee. Isn't that pretty fair?
Well, look, the nation has conversations with politicians every 3 years at election day. It would have been nice if Mr Abbott or Alex had started that conversation before the last election. I was running around talking to people during the Griffith by-election, and they said, no mention of Medicare co-payments. Even though there was the LNP's candidate was a doctor, there was no mention of that. Suddenly, it's an urgent conversation that we have to have. This is Alex, who voted against means testing of private health insurance. You know, when we started having the conversation about some of the budget constraints, Mr Abbott was in his most adversarial frame of mind and just voted no again for everything that was reasonable.
Yeah, well, look, I just have to say, Graham,
Labor believes in universal health care. That's it's been a tenet of the Labor Party for over 30 years. We do believe in it, but obviously we do have some challenges coming. But when Tony Abbott runs around and says he's the best friend of Medicare, it sounds like Dracula saying he's the best friend of the blood bank, as far as I'm concerned.
He did say
I don't
no
trust
surprises, no excuses government, Alex Hawke. So is he setting up the conversation, but is this something that the Liberal Party, the coalition, should be taking to the next election?
Well, look, I have to pull up Graham on one thing, and that is Dr Bill Glasson, you know, who does have a medical background, did talk about his support for a co-payment system in the Griffith by-election. He talked about it publicly. So, you know,
yes, but
Graham
he did pull
is
back
not
later in the campaign because there was a bit of public backlash about it.
Sure, but there's nothing to hide here. But he did state his support for that co-payment system as a doctor and as a medical professional, and plenty of the medical profession support us too. I think, as you point out, Laura, many people are happy to pay almost $5 for a cup of coffee these days. But, you know, your point about why we are doing this, well, we are doing this because Graham and his friends left us with a huge debt and deficit. That all of these questions have to be addressed looking forward from a responsible government. There's no money.
It's not fair just to point the finger of blame at Labor when it comes to health. This has been, as you just pointed out, Graham Richardson was talking about the problems in this area 2 decades ago. So perhaps we can point the blame at both governments, both Liberal and Labor governments here. But Graham Perrott, I also wanted to ask you about the aged pension. At the moment, that's only eligible for women at 64 years of age, men at 65. Is there scope for that to be increased, given that a long time ago, when the age pension was set, the average lifespan was a lot lower than it is today?
I think you'll find that it is going north because of legislation we brought in. I know that because a lot of people phoned concerned about it. I think it does peak out at 67. But you're right, you know, when Labor brought in the age pension, there were 7 workers to every 1 person on the pension. I think the average life expectancy for males was 52. Now, I can see 52 from where I am. The reality is now we've got an average age of, north of 80, and it's getting longer and longer every year.
Support, so you'd support a change in this area, even beyond what Labor has set in train?
Well, I'd have to talk to the party about it. We did make some difficult changes at the time. At the time, I remember the rancid approach of those opposite saying it was a disgrace. The reality is we are an ageing community. We need to focus on some of those challenges, those health challenges, which is why I can't understand why Mr Abbott has scrapped a lot of those preventative health measures, scrapped some of those advisory councils, people talking, you know, he's got happy to give money to Cadbury's, but have one of his advisors pulling down web pages that are about preventative health, you know, because they're the big challenges. We are not as fit and healthy as we should be as a society.
Okay.
More money should be put in preventative health.
I've got to jump in there, Laura, because I mean, if Graham wants to help here in this situation with lifting the age pension age, then he could make one phone call after this interview, and he could call his leader, Bill Shorten, who today has suggested that this raising of this issue by the government is somehow an attack on pensions, and he could express his strong view that he's just expressed there, Graham Perrott, and say that this is actually a Labor initiative, and Labor knew that the age pension has to go up.
We have already brought in legislation.
Yeah, that's correct, and we with our support, and you know, we all know that the age for the age pension will have to lift, Graham, and I mean, you can call Bill and tell him, because he's targeting us today on this issue.
All right, we welcome strong views on this program, but I want to move on. Let's now focus on jobs, particularly in Victoria. We've seen Toyota, Alcoa, Holden make some announcements that will make it difficult for many people in that area. Now, Bill Shorten is calling on the government to put forward a $100 million transition package. Alex Hawke, that seems like a fair number. Would you agree?
Well, look, I don't know about the number itself, but I do know there is transition packages in discussions inside the government, and of course they'll be announced in due course. What figure it is, I'm not really across the detail of what figure it should be. I do think, however, the government's taken a pretty generous approach in relation to industry packages. I know of many people in my own electorate that has lost their jobs this week. They've lost their jobs with no notice. They don't have any packages to sustain them. There's no help from government. They are, too currently wealthy to get any assistance from Centrelink. They're just unemployed. Okay. And that happens to most of the workforce out there. So I think that's got to be kept in perspective with all of the packages being discussed. A lot of people out there have lost their jobs or losing their jobs right now. There won't be any assistance from government.
Okay, Graham Perrott, we also have heard about calls from the government to lock in defence contract skills from Toyota workers, for example, are described as being transferable into that industry. But is it sensible to transfer jobs from one subsidy-dependent industry to another?
Well, I think defence, Alex and I will be on the same page on this. Defence is different to market mechanisms. I've always had the view, and I've said it publicly, that the motor industry did develop skills that were transferable. We have to be a nation that's able to defend ourselves. Our shipbuilders need contracts now. They're specific skills. The shipyards that we have at the moment are waiting for contracts right now. Decisions need to be made in the next few months that will determine the future of the Australian Navy and our naval industries and our shipbuilding industries. And I think we should be focusing on our ports right now so that those jobs aren't moved off overseas, because we can't buy all our defence equipment off the shelf to make it suitable for Australia. The submarines that run around in cold waters of Europe travel short distances. We're in we've got warmer waters and great distances. We have specific challenges in terms of making us safe. We cover 11% of the globe and defend it and make it safe. Okay. We have different challenges, and I think we need to invest in our shipbuilders. Okay,
Christine Lagarde, I just want to touch on this. Last night said the government should be doing, and all governments should be doing all they can to encourage women to stay and work. There's not enough powerful women on boards and in board positions. Alex Hawke, I know your position on Tony Abbott's paid parental leave scheme, a signature policy, but isn't that the purpose of the PPL?
It's one of the intentions of the policy. I think you've got to look at all your policy instruments in this. When I speak to women who talk about their struggles to get back into the workforce, mainly that centres around childcare at the point of when they're trying to re-enter the workforce. That is the most difficult nexus, how to encourage people to re-enter. Paid parental leave schemes, obviously the government introduced one. There's not enough evidence yet about what effect that has on female participation and over time.
What about quotas?
We do need to study it.
She expressed last night that she was never a fan of quotas. She's from the centre right.
I support Christine Lagarde on that, and the Labor Party has a quota system in relation to politics, for example. I don't see that as a good thing. We've always...
Why not?
Because there's plenty of talented women, and women don't need quotas to be promoted to boards or to get in. We need to just allow
Christine Lagarde seems to change. Think
so. Look, I don't believe in quotas. I don't think they work. I don't think they produce the effect you're trying to create, and they denigrate women. There's plenty of capable and talented women, and we do need to pursue pro-female policies, but that's looking at things like how to return women back into the workforce with incentives, not necessarily, a just paid parental leave.
Yeah, Graham Perrott, your reaction to that?
Firstly, can I congratulate Alex on his marriage? Speaking of his understanding of women, and I hope it all goes well. But in terms of answering the question, look, obviously Alex is a part of the government that has one female cabinet member. Obviously, Mr Abbott keeps saying no. Mr Abbott says there are plenty of talented women out there. The reality is, if you don't actively support women and encourage women and bring them on and give them every opportunity, then we'll end up with those horrible situations here in 2014 where you only have one female member of cabinet. It's very retrograde. I think we need to do what we can to support women, make sure that they're given opportunities to run in politics, to have a chance in the boardroom, because there seems to be institutionalised discrimination at the moment.
All right,
it's
Graham
continuing.
Perrett, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining me today, and Alex Hawke here in the studio.